ARCI Durban provides an exclusive rehab treatment for alcoholism and drug addiction. The only rehab in South Africa that offers a medical detox treatment. We offer a superior, evidence-based and medically cutting-edge approach to the treatment of addiction. If you have been frustrated by repeated failures at rehab recovery or are unaware that there are proven anti-craving medications that can significantly improve treatment outcomes, give us a confidential call to learn more about ARCA Durban's rehab program. Contact ARCA Durban on 078-2722-911 24 hours or call our office number 031-261-5515 and our Johannesburg number on 0622-770-911. Office number 011-656-0705.
A very warm welcome to African Essence. I'm your host, Leanne Jacobs. Today we're talking about organ donation, a topic that so many of us know so little about. The power of organ donation is definitely underrated. It does not merely affect the donor and the recipients. In fact, it impacts the families and friends as well. It is extremely important for those who are in need of an organ transplant so they can benefit from it. Further, it renews their life and enhances their health once their transplant is complete. In fact, it is a surreal feeling to experience how organ donation impacts the lives of individuals. Joining me now is Cindy Goldie and Tracy Gibbs. Welcome to African Essence.
Thank you.
First of all, tell me about what it is that you do.
So I'm the heart and lung transplant coordinator for Bosumed Hospital. I perform procurement and recipient logistics, which certainly can be quite involved.
One of my other roles I do are help and facilitate and manage the femoral head program on behalf of Ventinova Bone SA here in KZN for them.
Okay, so today we are talking about organ donation, major organs, as well as tissue donations. In respect with the illegal trafficking of organs, do you have any information as how far that is being done here in South Africa?
I certainly think that the incident that happened now nearly 20 years ago tightened up our checks and balances and our transparency, and to the best of our knowledge, there's nothing like that happening again. There's lots of cross-checks, especially with the Ministry of Health, to ensure that doesn't happen again.
Now, with that's actually good news. I would
That's
think,
very good news.
especially for South Africa.
Very much so.
Now, with regard to patients that are in need of transplants, organs or tissues, and the waiting list can be a bit hectic. It can be very, very long. What are some of the challenges that you face with patients that are on a waiting list, and then obviously for a retrieval of organs?
Well, from a solid organ point of view, it's just that there's not enough donors. I think part of the problem is the referrals. We're not getting the referrals of a potential donor from our healthcare practitioners. They're scared to raise it with the family. They don't want to consider it, perhaps because of their own feelings on the subject. But they deny the family that right to choose. And we don't know. So often they'll look at a family and say, oh, they probably don't know about organ donation. it's not for them to make that decision. Don't deny the family the right to choose. And from the tissue aspect, there's equally difficult scenarios.
Very much so. I mean, on my waiting list here, just in KZN, I have 950 to 1,000 people waiting for cornea transplants, and some of them require two. And I think I'm going to look at all those patients and I'm thinking, where am I going to find a donor for these patients? We can only find donors when we get the referrals, and that's where the stumbling block comes in, is that we don't get that initial call to help us be able to approach the families and ask them how would their loved one have felt about donation of tissue. So that's a major block for us. That's the only way we can get those referrals, is by being referred to us. Then it gives us the opportunity to take it further. So yeah, we sit and we look at those patients and how we're going to help them.
Tracy, can you explain the whole process from the moment that a donor is located to the actual transplant being, the procedure being implemented to full recovery? What is the actual process there? Because I know there are timelines as well with regard to, there's different timelines for the cells or the tissues and then your major organs as well. Can you explain that process?
Well, for the corneas and that, initially we had 12 hours from the time the patient passes to the time that we actually do the procurement. We had 12 hours. And then a bit of research was done, which we from overseas, and we've extended that time to 18 hours, and we can actually push it to 24, which actually helps us for those long distance patients. If we're getting a referral from like Ladysmith or Newcastle, it gives us the time to actually think and consider those patients, where before that was a time constraint for us. So once we get that thing, we then have to look as obviously the time of death is really important, but then also look at the age of the patient, and then going through from the medical condition, what did the patient pass from? If it ticks all the boxes that this could be a potential donor, then the next step for us is to actually contact the family. And from there on, it's an option for them. They don't have to say yes. So we ask them how they would feel about their loved ones donating their tissue. And then if we go from there, then we'll help facilitate the whole lot, and then we go down to wherever the facility is and do the actual removal of the cornea for them. And then once we put it in the solutions that we have, then it goes into the fridge, quite cold, between 4 and 8 degrees, and then we have 14 days that it's got to be used by. And the nice thing about cornea transplants is that you don't need to have any medication for the rest of your life to stop you rejecting your cornea. It doesn't. And your left one can go in your right eye, and the right one can go in left eye. And you're not going to be cross-eyed now because we move the corneas around on the different eye. So that's the nice thing. And there's less than 1% chance of actually rejecting that tissue. And normally, if it is rejected, it's normally because it hasn't been looked after, because it takes anything from 6 months to a year to settle. So they need to make sure that they manage it, and they go and have a regular checkup with their doctors until such time as the process is done and the tissue has settled. But rejection rate is less than 1%. As to solid organs is a different story altogether on that one.
And what is the success rate of an actual organ or tissue transplant?
Well, for tissues, it's 100%. So for corneas, yes, and obviously bone is a different story. We'll talk about that later. But for solid organs, Cindy can give a little bit more on that one.
It does vary from organ to organ. It just depends. You can go from a heart being 98% to a lung being 50% to a heart and lungs being 30%. It differs.
Now let's look at affordability. We've got people from different walks of life, especially when it comes to our South Africans. We've got people that are in poverty-stricken areas that are also probably in need of this kind of medical treatment. What is the procedure when it comes to raising funds or being able to afford something like this?
So thankfully, Groote Schuur now has a lung program, as well as the heart program. The problem is they're on quota. They're only allowed to do so many a year from an affordability point of view. Groote Schuur also have a liver program. Here in KZN, there's a kidney program and now a pediatric kidney program at Nkosi Albert Luthuli, and they've started doing livers. So it just depends on the centres, but most big cities now can at least do renal transplants in the state sector. From the private sector, A heart transplant doesn't cost much more than a bypass surgery. And in fact, sometimes the private sector can do it cheaper than the state sector. The problem is the medication after the transplant. That's the expensive part.
And what is it that you find when, especially on your waiting list, what is the organ that is most in demand?
Sure, that's so hard to say. Tracy's got 1,000 corneas waiting, and most of them need 2. Kidneys, there's probably about 5,000 people around the country. Hearts, I've got 65 on my waiting list just here in KZN. So it just depends. They're all equally as tough. It's harder to get a lung than it is to get a kidney. A donor who donates all their organs has 2 kidneys, so 2 people will benefit. So it just depends. It just depends. It's so hard to say. You can't say one is more demanding over the other.
Tracy, can you explain how COVID has actually affected the organ transplant on a whole?
For us at Tissue, it had a huge impact on us. You know, the referrals obviously stopped. Most of the patients that were passing were COVID positive, and we couldn't use those patients. And we were getting, like I say, we weren't getting the referrals, but every day there were new patients on the list waiting and for corneas. And a lot of our patients, because of that we couldn't find donors. And on a good day, it's hard to find a donor, because that's the gist of the whole thing is we do not have enough donors for the amount of people on the waiting list for solid organs as well as for tissue. That's the crust of the whole thing. So with this being here, a lot of our patients actually past the point that we could actually help them. A lot of them lost their eyesight completely. Some of them had to have their eyes removed because they had perforations or ulcers on their corneas, and there was just nothing else that we could do. So it had a huge impact. Besides that as well, around the country, now as it stands, we're the only surviving tissue bank in South Africa at the moment. So for us, we being the only one in KZN, our responsibility isn't only just for private patients, it is also for the patients in the government sector. So if we get a donor, one cornea will always be allocated to private and one will be allocated to government. If there isn't anybody that is classified as an emergency, and there is 2 patients classified as emergency in the government, then they will obviously be allocated to there, because we're in the business of saving patient sites, and obviously we have to prioritize at that. So if we've got 2 patients at the government facilities that are dire emergency, the very next available corneas will go to them. But yes, COVID was a huge price, because for us we had no access to the hospitals, so we couldn't have access to those potential donors, as well as to the funeral homes. We didn't have access to those institutes where we could go and do the retrieval. So it made a huge impact on our patients as such, but for us as well, because our hands were basically tied. There was nothing that we could do. We were all in the same situation regarding the same solid organs as well as tissue. COVID just put a standstill to everything that we were trying to achieve. And now it feels like we're starting all over again. We have to get the awareness out there. It's like reinventing the wheel to start the process all again. It put us that far back.
Well, it's sad to see what COVID has actually done, but also good to see that we can create some sort of change. Speaking of which, Cindy, what is it that you think we can do? There's a responsibility, I think, both in the medical field as well as at home. What is it that you think we can do in both those aspects to create some sort of awareness and then change going forward?
Well, like Tracy said, we almost need to start again with our awareness and putting protocols in place in our health institutes. But a nurse has a thing that says they are the patient advocate. They advocate for the patient, but why do they only do it when the patient's still alive? When the patient dies, they should still be their advocate to make sure that their wishes are fulfilled, that they're respectful of their culture or religion. And so we really have to encourage our healthcare sector to fulfill a person's wishes. We appeal to our doctors if they're declaring a patient brain stem dead, which is the condition under which they can donate their solid organs, that they don't omit the one choice. So one of the choices is to withdraw treatment or cap treatment. That means don't escalate it. Don't try and do anything more to keep the heart rate going or the blood pressure going. But the third option of organ donation often gets omitted from the discussion. And we're saying, please don't do that. In the same instance, it goes for police dealing with the family, a grief counselling institute dealing with the family, a funeral home dealing with the family. Don't omit that one question. Did your loved one have any wishes like organ donation? Because it can change people's lives.
I think considering that while the patient is alive will help in making that decision, obviously make that decision a lot easier, obviously after that family member has.
I have to say what makes that decision easier is having the conversation before you even get there. As a family, sit down and have that conversation.
Well, to both Cindy and Tracy, thank you so much for coming onto the show and sharing, I think, such important information with our community.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Organ donation is a life-giving opportunity for those who are at the end of their line for hope. It carries the power to enhance the lives of people and change them forever. As the need for organ donors is growing by the day, it has become necessary to increase awareness about organ donation. There are a lot of misconceptions regarding this subject, and we must do our best to clear them. Joining me now is Vimla Reddy, whose husband Colin is the perfect example of paying it forward. Colin went from an organ recipient to an organ donor. Vimla, thank you for joining us on African Essence. Tell us about your husband Colin.
There's so much to say about him, but the word that comes to mind first of all is that he was our hero. He was somebody who loved life. He had a great passion for running, for gardening, for family, the simple things in life. He was fit and healthy. He was a Comrades runner. I've been there to support him from his very first Comrades until the one he ran last in 2018. But it was a very surreal journey because he found his passion along the way, and then I was there to support him. He ran 11 Comrades marathons, qualified for his green number, and he ran 2 oceans, qualified for his 9, well, he was going to do his 10 in the year that he had his first heart attack in 2017. Came out of nowhere, there were no warning signs. He just had a massive blockage on his left-hand side of the heart. Rendered him in hospital for about a month because it was quite severe. And he came back out of it, got back into a little bit of training, pushing himself a little bit, went back to gym in 2018. We started running together. I used to walk, but then I used to run as well with him. Done quite a few races running alongside of him, and it was a tremendous pleasure to be able to run beside my husband. It was really awesome.
Well, he sounds like a very ambitious person, having run so many Comrades marathons. We all know that it's not an easy race. What was it that actually took place, leading to the fact that Colin now would need an actual heart transplant?
Well, in 2019, he was showing a little bit of fatigue. Around May, he had a second heart attack on my son's 18th birthday. After that, we decided to look for a second opinion. We saw another doctor at Busamed in Gateway. He had a little bit of an assessment done, and by August that year, his heart was really taking a toll, and he was diagnosed with right heart failure, and his only option was to have a heart transplant. So he was listed in that same month in 2019, and he waited 21 months for his donor, which we received on the 27th of May last year. So he had his surgery on the 28th of May, and he survived for 24 hours and passed away on the 29th of May last year.
Tell us, let's just go back a little bit. What was his condition like over those 21 months of actually being on the waiting list?
He was somebody with a very, very strong mind, and you would think that we would have been there to give him the kind of mental support that he needed, but he was giving us the mental support. He had a tremendous mind. He kept himself strong. If there was any challenges, which he did in 2020 in October, his sugar just shot through the roof. So he was diagnosed as diabetic. It's one of the conditions that follow being on the heart transplant list. So he took it upon himself to readjust his diet, and he just carried on from there. He never ever questioned why him, why now, why this, you know, he just carried on being strong. He was more my support than I was his, but that is why I call him my hero.
And you mentioned that just 24 hours after the transplant, he passed away. I'm so sorry. That must have really, really been tragic, hard for you to go through. And we want to express our condolences to you and your family as well.
Thank you.
Did he mention, Colin, that he would be keen or interested in becoming a donor?
Well, when he was listed the very same day, myself and him and my 2 kids became organ donors. So we registered the very same day. And it's been a journey for us because we've learned so much of something that we never knew before. But now having somebody in our midst who needed a heart, or any organ for that matter, made us research and learn everything. And then we started being advocates for it. You know, wherever we went, we'd ask people. I mean, in the job I am, I meet a lot of clients, and I also have that conversation with them. It's something that just finds its way there. But, and then people, you know, they would ask, you know, tell me more about it, because there's not a lot of awareness, but we're trying to create that awareness. And hopefully with his story, we can get a lot more donors out there.
And how was the discussion or the topic actually brought up in them actually approaching you and asking whether or not you would actually allow your husband to be a donor, and what was actually donated by your husband?
Okay, from the very moment that we became registered donors, he always said that, you know what, he knows, well, we knew what the waiting was like. We experienced it firsthand, and it's not always easy. It is a journey where you question yourself, you question God, you question your religion, you question everything. And knowing that there are people out there who would say, okay, I would like to be a donor, that was the hope that kept us going. So when he used to say that, you know what, I'd give anything to be able to help somebody if I was in a position to do so. So it was a very, very easy and simple decision for me to make when I was asked by Cindy a few minutes after he passed away if I would donate his corneas, and I said yes, without a second doubt. I said yes, because he would have wanted to give whatever he could, but his corneas were donated.
That is an amazing gesture, and for you to actually carry out, you know, the wishes of your husband speaks volumes. And I'm assuming that there was already somebody waiting for his donation. And how does that process work?
Okay, there is a list as well, and he donated his cornea, so it went to 2 people. We don't know who they are, but would maybe someday like to meet them, to know that, you know what, there is part of him out there still, allowing 2 people the gift of sight. I mean, that's a wonderful gift. A gift is a gift, you know. So yeah, we don't know them. And there is the people at the eye bank they would know who it was donated to. But yeah, with his gifts that he's given 2 people the gift of sight.
Well, it's awesome to know that he continues to live on, even though he's not with us. And I'm sure Colin is also very proud of both you and your kids as well.
Yes, I'm sure he is.
Well, thank you so much, Vimla, for coming onto the show and sharing your story with us.
It's such a pleasure.
Our next guest, Sean Samuj, was diagnosed with renal failure, and this led to his need of a kidney transplant. Sean, welcome to African Essence.
Thank you.
Sean, take us through your diagnosis and how you actually found out that you were ill.
Okay, so I had a sister who was diagnosed first with polycystic kidney. And polycystic kidney is basically cysts that grow on the kidney, and it takes over the kidney, and she went into renal failure. And she asked me, and that was, I was probably about 27 years old to have it checked out, and I did that, and I was then diagnosed with the same polycystic kidneys, which we both inherited from my dad. I knew about it at that stage, and later on in life it got worse and the kidneys started failing, and I had to go on to dialysis at that stage. Yeah, so that's basically how I found out about the kidney failure.
And when did you realize that you needed a kidney? And what was that process like, the stage before actually waiting for your transplant?
Okay, so during the time that I was I was on dialysis for about 3.5 years, and the process to go onto the list, you got to go onto the transplant list first, and it's quite a daunting process because you have to go through a whole lot of tests and to make sure that you are a suitable candidate for a transplant. Now, at this stage, I'm talking about cadaver transplants, and a cadaver transplant means that someone who either was in an accident, who became brain dead, and they were organ donors, and they would then have their organs donated to other members who are on the list. It could be heart, liver, lung, kidney, bone marrow, and now also stem cell. So it is a long process, and in South Africa we have a very low number of members or people in society that are organ donors. And the biggest thing that we try and promote, or I try and promote, is for people to become an organ donor.
Well, what I'd like to know is, I mean, you just explained the process that this was also hereditary. And then obviously with the waiting process, it's not easy. What was it like in terms of the challenges when it comes to the family environment? Did you and your family now, because it's hereditary, did the rest of your family also need to get tested? Just to make sure as a preventative measure? And what was some of the challenges that your family members had to actually go through, coming into that knowledge that either their dad or their uncle is now in this medical condition?
So, with polycystic kidneys, it's not something that you can pick up very early. So I got a set of twins, boy and girl, and well, at this stage they don't have any sign of it, but we will test them at a later stage, and hopefully that they don't carry through the same disease that I had. But again, it is something that we had to deal with from day one. And the hard part of it prior to the transplant was that I needed to be on dialysis. And dialysis means you sit on a machine and all the blood from your body is drained out and goes through it's an artificial kidney that cleans your blood and brings it back into your body. So this is about a 4-hour process. So you got to do it 3 times a week, and it's really, really difficult because you sit there. When you finished, you are absolutely drained. It takes all the energy from you, and you got to be able to go back to work if you know you're working, and to carry on life. So with the family, they had to be careful. I couldn't be around anybody that was sick, because if I picked up anything, it would be a lot worse for me than for a normal person because of kidney failure. So, but I must say that the family got together and we adapted and we pulled through it. Yes, that's.
And how long was this process for before your transplant? This process of going through dialysis and, you know, being sort of sometimes maybe alienated from your family, that could not have been easy. How long was that process?
Well, it was almost a 4-year process. I knew that I had to stay on it, and for me, it was something that I had to deal with. It wasn't something that you could say, you know, I had a choice in choosing. It's not this or that. It's you got to go through it, and you got to deal with it. And luckily enough, my family understood, and my wife, coming from an English teacher's background, explained a lot to my kids. And they kind of understood a lot as to the processes and what happened and how to deal with it. To tell you that I also traveled overseas while being on dialysis. I found a clinic in some of the countries. I got there and went for dialysis while they were on holiday. I spent a whole day sometime away from them. But they understood all this and they knew that these were the challenges. But again, they were so supportive that I didn't really feel like I was alienated or that I had any problem. I was actually cushioned, if I may say so.
Well, I would think so. Family is so important, especially in pulling together with a time like this. But you sound like you've really pulled through. You've overcome so much over 4 years. You're really, really strong, and I'm sure your family is very, very proud of you. I want to talk about there being support for other patients that have renal failure. Do you know of other patients that are in a similar situation, and are they getting the support that they need?
Okay, now that's a little bit of my forte. So I am part of the Transplant Sports Association. I'm the chairman for KZN, so we are the KZN Transplant Sports Association, and I'm the vice chairman for the country. And our job is to get people who've had transplants involved in sport of some kind, whereby they keep themselves active, and also a support group where we kind of bring them together so that they can get information and also be able to cope with transplant. Now, I'm talking about after transplant. So, and we also, one of our main objectives is to promote organ donating. To be an organ donor, all you have to do is fill in a form, send it through, and you're an organ donor. And it doesn't mean that if you're an organ donor, they can come take out your organs if something happens. Basically, what it means is that if you ever in an accident or you become brain dead for whatever reason, your organs can be then harvested and given to somebody which will now have a new lease on life, like myself. If it wasn't for my donor, I would not be sitting here today. I'd probably be dead by now. So, you know, we're grateful for people who become organ donors. And again, not everybody has a chance to harvest their organs. There's only probably 1% of people who are organ donors where they would be in a situation where their organs can be donated. And also in this circumstance, the person can decide whether they want to give just one organ or all the organs, or just part, whether it's bone marrow or stem cell. So it's a personal thing.
Well, I'm glad to see the association is doing their part, and I would assume getting a lot of success out of it. With regards to your process, you were for 4 years on a waiting list. What was that moment? What did it feel like when they eventually called you and said, okay, we have a donor? I mean, that was a life-changing moment for you. Describe that for us.
You know, I always tell people that the whole process was a miracle. And the reason why I say that is we went overseas on a holiday. I was on dialysis at that time, and we went to Dubai, and I found a clinic where I went for dialysis 3 times a week, like normal. And we got back. It was probably a day prior to them calling me. When they called me, we only landed, and the next day they called me. So I say, and also how that whole process happened. If it wasn't God's intervention, then I don't know. It's so many things had to fall in place for me to be there. Remember, when an organ is harvested, it only has a very short lifespan. So you got to be there. So if they called me at 11 o'clock at night and said, you got to be in the hospital at 12 o'clock for the transplant, and everything had to be done at that time. And when I left home, I greeted my kids and I said goodbye to them like I'll never see them again, because I don't know what would happen. So, again, it's drawn me closer. It's made my faith stronger in society as well, that there are good people out there, and lots of them. if it wasn't for my donor, again, I'd say I wouldn't be sitting here. So, yeah.
Well, you look really, really good. How long has it been since your transplant and how are you feeling?
Okay, so I had a transplant in 2015, right? So it's 7 years now. And it was in January 2015 on the 21st. Prior to my transplant, it was very difficult. Life was difficult. You had to be in the hospital. You had to go on to dialysis. Your whole day was dedicated to that, and it was very difficult to do anything because you had to watch what you eat. You couldn't drink anything because there's no fluids. The fluids are not being extracted from your body. So, and after that, it's just like everybody else. I live normally. Yes, I do take medication to keep my immune system low. This is in order so that the body doesn't reject an organ that is put in, because remember, that's a foreign organ. Your body looks at it as a foreign organ. So you have to be on immune suppressant medication, and this is to reduce your immunity. Now, life is great. I mean, I play golf, I cycle, I swim when I want to. And again, I have to tell you, I mean, like I said, I represent the Transplant Sports Association. I've been to 2 World Transplant Games so far. So the first one was in Spain in 2017, and I got a silver medal for golf there.
Wow,
and
congratulations.
Thanks. And in 2019, it was in the UK, and I also participated in that and also received a medal there. Our next World Games is in Australia next year. And I have to tell you, South Africa, we do so well. We're a small number, but we're such a dynamic group. We finish in the top 5 in the world. Every year so far, we finish in the top 5 when it comes to medals during these World Games.
Well, you're going to Australia, you're bringing back the gold.
I hope we can.
Sean, you're looking like the epitome of such a good example, you know, going into and receiving such hope. You know, what is some of the encouraging words that you'd like to say to some of the viewers out there that might find themselves in a similar situation?
So for people who have organ failure, I just say to them, be strong, understand that, keep your faith firstly, and understand that whatever's meant for you, you will receive. And I just feel that with our organization, we're just there to encourage people who are on the list or who have organ failure to be strong and understand that it's just a process you have to go through, and just understand that if you're on the list, somewhere out there are people who have become organ donors, which will help you one day. And to the rest of the viewers, I just like to say, please, guys, please, become an organ donor. It's such a simple process. Just do it, and it's nothing. You might never have to, you don't have to do anything. It's not something that you have to do or process or whatever it is. Just give your name in. Say, I want to be an organ donor. Let your family know that if something ever happened to you, that you would like to be an organ donor. And speak to your doctor as well. Let him know as well if ever something happened to you. And you could save, one donor can save up to 7 lives. That's one donor. Now I'm talking about 7 people like myself who's got a second chance in life. You giving that person the chance.
Why would you not want to be a part of that? You know, but Sean, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Your story is truly inspiring and encouraging. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Did you know that a single donor can save many lives? This is such an opportunity should you consider to become a donor. Thus, measures on creating awareness must be taken. Thank you for watching. We do hope you've enjoyed the show. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, African Essence TV. Goodbye and God bless.
Sell your old, damaged, or unwanted gold jewelry. Gold Bar, raising the bar in the gold industry. Better prices, safe, fast, and professional service. Contact us at 082-881-8654, Cornubia at goldbar.co.za.